Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Please take your seats now. We will begin with our final technical session. So, Nithi will be moderating the session. Please come to the floor, dais, and then take it forward. Thank you. Sure.
Yeah. No, thanks. We'll give a minute for everyone to take their seat. Okay. Dear friends, welcome back to the session on addressing social inclusion and gender equity in just energy transition. It's my privilege and honor to moderate this stellar all-women panel on this topic. So I am truly the thorn among the roses. So I would, as I call your name, as I recognize you, I'd invite the panelists to come on stage and take their seat. Starting with Dilis Indibaisa, who's Programs Manager for Ecological Christian Organization, Uganda. Sandra Yanti Winarsa, Program Development Manager, HIVOS, Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. Pasang Dolma Sherpa, Executive Director, Center for Indigenous Peoples Research and Development, Nepal. And Sadia Dada, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for K Electric Limited, Pakistan. Please give them a warm round of applause. So we have representatives from 2 continents, Africa and Asia, from 3 regions, East Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. So, and 2 sectors, civil society and the private sector. So we have a good representation here. So before we get into the discussion, I'd just like to do a quick introduction to all the panelists. Dilis is currently responsible for coordinating program planning and implementation of strengthening the multi-actor partnerships platform for implementing nationally determined contributions with 100% renewable energy for all in Uganda. She has lobbied for gender mainstreaming and amplification of the role of women in energy planning. She has also been a stakeholder specialist in coordinating local consultative meetings on renewable energy. Sandra has over 16 years of professional experience working with government, civil society organizations, businesses, and social enterprises. Sandra focuses her ambition on creating inclusive, decentralized, clean energy solutions as a driving force for local development and just climate transition for the rights holders group. Pasang has been working with indigenous peoples, women and local communities for the recognition of indigenous peoples' knowledge, cultural values and customary institutions that contribute for sustainable management of forests, ecosystem, biodiversity and climate resilience. She has served as co-chair of International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. Sadia Dada is a business strategist and transformational professional specializing in reputational management and sustainability with over 17 years of experience in a diverse range of sectors, including energy, fast-moving consumer goods, food and beverage, financial services, as well as utility and telecommunications. Her organization is an integrated power utility with 3.4 million customers and 10,000 employees, supplying 19 billion gigawatts of electricity annually. So this is just a snapshot into them. They all have much longer backgrounds. For time constraints, we will keep it at that. And what we will do is, the objective of this session is to discuss how to address social and gender equity in just transition planning and implementation processes. And to share lessons learned from the experiences of the panelists in different countries. And we would also be interested in listening to your views later on during the Q&A session, because I'm sure this is a topic in which many of you will have a lot to contribute. So without further ado, so the structure will be, I will ask the panelists questions, they will respond, and then we'll do a couple of rounds, and then we will have a Q&A session with the audience. All right, so I'll start by putting forward the first question. How does transition to renewable energy address social and gender equity? Will it address it at all, or will the energy transition further contribute to gender and social exclusion? I'll start in the sequence of the speaker sitting next to me. Dilys, would you like to take the first crack at the question?
Thank you, Nisi. How does renewable energy transition address social and gender equity? Different renewable energy technologies have contributed to addressing social and gender equity in Uganda. Clean cooking, for Uganda really, that is improved energy cook stoves with less smoke have improved the health, improved indoor pollution. Because it's women and girls basically involved in cooking, it provides more time and rest because less time is spent going to collect fuel load. Increased solar usage can help girls to read more at night, which means higher attainment of grades, and also they can stay more in school because even at night, because of electricity and solar, they can do work that they could have done early before they go to school. There are reduced incidences of fire. And then also, there is time saved in avoided journeys to go collect fuel wood or go charge batteries when there is solar. And then also, for maternal health, previously it's only the large referral hospitals that could do C-section or help women give birth, but even in rural areas where there is solar at the grade 3 hospitals, women can give birth. And then also work that could previously be done, like food processing, grain milling, tailoring. Right now, electricity has made that less tedious, and this is work basically done by girls and women. And economically, electricity and solar helps work to be done at night, so it improves the productivity of women and girls. And then activities like street markets, where girls and women participate, are less dangerous due to the solar panels on the roads. And so I believe that with technical and financial support, electrification, solar can help women start enterprises, which can also empower them and lead to economic empowerment. Then, whether the energy transition will further contribute to gender and social inclusion, no, I don't think, because no one is working towards that exclusion. We're working towards gender inclusion and gender equity and social inclusiveness.
Yeah, Sandra, from your experience, what has it been like?
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Niti. And thank you as well, the organizer, for having me here. I think the how is actually depends on how we can make gender and social inclusion more visible in our renewable energy research, assessment, and also in practical solutions. I think almost all of us here since yesterday have been hearing a lot about technology aspect, investment aspects, return of investment, and then greenhouse emissions reductions, those kind of numbers. But rarely we hear about gender. Social inclusion, yes, I hear some of the speakers and the experts mention about it, but not gender equity. So I think is how to make this issue to be visible on the map of renewable energy. And then how actually Jesse, we call it Jesse in civil society, to actually bring it as an important agenda, the same as technological options and investment calculations, and whether we can put GESI as the standard, for example, when we have to develop a feasibility studies, for example, because that is where, you know, financiers, also government, could also make some approval whether that project is being approved or not. So there hasn't been any standardizations of GESI to be implemented or to be included in the feasibility studies or baseline.
Maybe you could just expand on what GESI is for the audience who may not be familiar with the term.
Yeah, GESI is gender equity and social inclusion. So it is a short name of that issue, that aspects. Yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, we as the actor of renewable energy, whether academics, whether practitioners, whether developer, need also to have a full grasp of what GESI is all about. It's not only about theoretical aspects, you know, the IPCC said so, you know, the bank said so, but what is actually to encourage the players to do it on the ground. So we need more practical solutions. We need more guidelines how to do it. So it's not about theoretical aspects. So I think that is my key point, Niti, when we talk about the how to. Second is also about narrowing the gap. Narrowing the gap between, for example, when we come to a project developer, then how they do the data collection, whether it is disaggregated or not, and how they design the GESI aspect in it, and how they implement and monitor of the planning itself. Second is about eliminating the barrier. So what kind of barrier, when we talk about this sector, is about the perceptions of roles between men and women. And it is about improving hiring practices for project developers, for companies, you know, doing power generations, for example. And then it's about opportunities and participations that is equally being provided for both men and women, and also young people as part of it. So the second one is about eliminating the barrier, and the third one, I think, is about capacities. You know, gender equity and social inclusion needs a very committed political buy-in from the very top level. When it comes to government, then probably it needs to be coming from the president. When it comes to companies, it has to be coming from the commissioner and, you know, from the CEO, and how they can understand the importance of it. Because later on, then they will allocate dedicated staff with experience and with knowledge on GESI, and at the important level is also allocating the budget, because when you put GESI on your paper but without allocating some resources on it, it's just nice on paper, but there's no actually you know, real action on the ground. And I think at the later stage, yeah, you can showcase GESI as part of your KPI or indicator performance. Thank you.
Yeah, Pasang, yeah. Would you like to respond, and maybe from also the additional perspective of the indigenous women?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for your invitation. I would like to express my gratitude and also congratulations for all this great event. Especially from the views from the gender equity and social inclusion perspectives in the energy transaction. I'm not the expert on the energy sectors, but however, I can share my own perspectives towards the you know, from the indigenous worldviews and from the gender worldviews. And especially, you know, like we have been implementing, we have been hearing the gender equity for whole kind of, you know, transitional phases of the developments, including these energy sectors. However, on the ground reality, is still that discourse on the global sectors and also on the paper sectors has not been really realistic on the ground. We are here to meet the target of the Paris agreements, catching up 1.5 degree, no doubt. But also we are also aware that the Paris agreements not just talk about the temperature limitation, but also it talks about the rights of indigenous people, especially the role and contribution of the indigenous knowledge and cultural values and practices that has been really bottom line for climate resilience. And then also, just to indicate the IPCC report also, the recent sixth assessment report has indicated the local values, the indigenous knowledge is a bottom line for the climate resilience, forest adaptation in many ways. And also there are many, like IPCC or IUCN or World Bank or, there are many studies already clearly indicated that knowledge and the cultural values actually on the ground has a really big contribution for climate change resilience. So in the energy sectors, that discourse is already been visible at the global discourse, especially in the UNCCC, even CBD. I'm just back from the Montreal. There has been a lot of discussion going on there. And also in the Samal-Seko, that was a discussion. And also just to highlight that I was the first inaugural co-chair of the local communities and indigenous peoples platform of the UNCCC. And that is also the outcome of the Paris agreements, along with the establishment of the platform and putting forward on the gender basis as well as on the role and contribution of local and indigenous peoples' experiences and knowledge for climate change resilience. However, when we come that global discourse on whole scenario at the national level, still the discourse, the implication of the discourse is maybe not seen even the 25% at the national level, but on the ground level, maybe 2-3%. No, so that is one of the challenges that we need to address in the sectors of the energy sectors. And then in Nepal, energy sectors is more focusing on the hydropower energy. Like in this afternoon, we also discussed there's a possibility of the solar panels and also the wind energy. But however, as we have seen on the ground, is a more implication on the hydropower. So when we see in the hydropower, one of the very sad part, the challenging part for all of us to realize, this is coming from the country level, that we have a hardly inclusive policy. Either there's a, like for example, in the compensation determinant committee, that is one of the committee for working on the energy sectors, there's a hardly inclusive of indigenous peoples or women or youth. So this is one of the challenges how we deal with the local reality. I'll stop for the moment here.
So Sadia, you come from an electric company and someone I think normally not so common in settings such as this, so very good to have you. So yeah, you probably come from answer this question from a different dimension, so over to you.
So thank you. All of yesterday I felt like I was sticking out like a sore thumb, and if that wasn't enough, he spelled it out for me. But as a woman working in the power sector, I'm fairly used to it. It's pretty much an everyday routine for me. And let me put that in perspective for you. The World Economic Forum, they just put out a gender gap report. And for the worst sectors for women in leadership to be in, the energy sector came out third worst, to be clear. Only 20% of women leaders, which basically means 1 out of every 5 women are in leadership roles in the power sector. And that's not the only problem. We're also paid much less than our male counterparts. So if you look at the gender pay gap, it's also amongst the worst in the energy sector, about 20% less for the same amount of work and similar work experience. So it's good to be here. And if I come back to your question on whether the clean energy transition is going to make it better or worse, I'd just like to say we should be on the right side of history this time and not let that happen. And I think we've got enough strength in the room to make sure that we don't. Delise and Sandra spoke a lot about it. And Ms. Pasang, I just want to share that I couldn't find you yesterday, so I looked you up online, and what an overwhelming profile. So it's actually an honor to be sitting with you here and be a part of this panel. So I do want to talk about the renewable sides, particularly photovoltaic. So a positive study, IRENA also put out a report. IRENA seems to be the famous quote from a source of quotation of stats in the industry, and I think we need a lot more. They put out a study and they said as far as the photovoltaic industry is concerned, they're leading in terms of gender. So twice as much gender representation. So where it's 22% for the entire sector, it's about 40% in PV. So I think we're already off to a good start, and we just need to make sure that the momentum is maintained. So I want to reflect back to what Sandra was talking about in terms of the GESI. And I think we need more tools like this to make sure that we don't drop the ball. We keep track and we make sure that women are not just participating, but actually in driving the decision making when it comes to the renewable transition, particularly for use cases such as cooking and delivery, maternal health that Dilys talked about. So if you have women driving these decision makings, I think the policies and the execution is going to be a lot better and a lot smoother. So that's my point of view. It's possible, we just need to make sure that we don't drop the ball on it.
Thanks. So we've had a fairly positive response to the question. Yeah, maybe I'll just be provocative here in the sense there was a study on just energy transition with a focus on women by the Stockholm Environment Institute, and they found that with regard to women in particular, when energy transition takes place, they actually get burdened with more roles. So while you were saying that it saves them time, unlike for the men, they captured that time, whereas for women it meant that they were taking on additional roles because some time was spared. And also coming to Sandra's point that, yeah, okay, it needs to be driven from the very top. I totally agree. From the president, what happens if it isn't? Then how do you ensure the protections? How do we make sure that gender equity and social inclusion are integrated in the energy transition if it's not driven from the very top? And of course, then you also have just energy transition partnerships, two of which have been announced in Southeast Asia, one for Indonesia and one for Vietnam. And, the whole idea is to transition away from coal for these countries. Pasang, what happens if, it leads to, okay, we need to put on onshore wind and leads to deforestation as excuse, we're doing it for climate change. We've been asked to transition away from coal, thereby affecting indigenous peoples who are living on those lands. So how do we, create the process where we can, make sure that women don't continue to have an unfair burden in the home because of the transition, and that if it's not driven from the top, it's not taken seriously, or that indigenous people's rights are sacrificed in the name of climate change?
Yeah, thank you. So in addition to gender streamlining in policy frameworks at the top, besides that, like you said, there is need to establish regulations for licensed companies like private sector that are gender responsive, but then also to operationalize the gender responsive actions into budgeting and planning, because if they are not budgeted for them, that's when they are not implemented. But then also what is key, I know Sandra talked about the data collection, gender responsive data collection. There is need to ensure that we do gender considerations in monitoring gender projects. But then also what is also key is gender sensitive consultation and participatory decision making, so that we bring on board the different kinds of gender, men, women, elderly, the marginalized communities. Under this, I think it is very key to challenge cultural and social norms. In Uganda, there are communities where women cannot own land in the northeastern region in Karamoja right now. So if you don't have land rights, there is no way you can even talk about a pole being elected on for you to get electricity. So, and also some gender stereotypes about women climbing poles to work on electricity lines and such things. Then also, I think there is need to establish gender targets to make sure that the women are equally represented in technical and leadership roles, and also to ensure gender accountability in energy-related participatory processes. So if at the top they're not taking it up, if in every participatory process, as civil society or non-state actors, we task the government people like Lazarus over there for accountability for gender and social inclusion. And there is also a need to support women's indigenous knowledge and innovativeness. Yesterday we were sharing about under the cook stove breakout room, about women have traditional knowledge that they've used to, that saves energy, to build on that. That would be actively involving them. Then also establishing platforms for women like this to participate. It would have been good if rural indigenous women were here too, but then also supporting energy projects by women or networks that women are doing. Yeah, I think that would also build on, apart from the policy mainstreaming, we can do all this to build on to ensure that women, girls, other social groups are not excluded from this transition process.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that question, Niti, because we work a lot with the community, with the local community, and the double burden is indeed there. Just everyone, maybe for those who are not yet, aware about this matters, gender is not about women alone. So it entails men and women. So when it comes to gender awareness, we have to bring men inside. So that is where the double burden will be going to be eliminated, because the man is also understand about this burden is not supposed to be on women's shoulder alone, but the man is actually also part of it. So there has to be that kind of balance, collaborations within the household level, if I can put it that way, this as an example. So that's part of the strategy for not having more burden on women when it comes to energy coming into the house. To address the second question that you addressed to me in regards to where, what happened if the top level is not actually supporting this. Well, we have to find a ways on getting our allies, for your all information, international funders, like GCF, GEF, ADB, the World Bank, is actually putting that kind of requirements as part of their, one of the requirements of proposal to be approved to get their funding, whether it's grant or whether it's a loan or whether technical assistance, that kind of mechanism. So I think we can work into that angle from the international perspective and mainstreaming this as part of the requirements when it comes to financing access. That's one. Because government will definitely going to overlook that, because we are now aware here as well from the audience that access to finance is still a challenge for some countries. And secondly, we have to make GESI impact to be much more visible. Especially for the private developers. They need to understand that if they don't pay attention on gender and social inclusion, they don't improve, whatever business that they're implementing, they're not actually impacted to the social and economic situation, meaning there would be less demand. They cannot pay, the community cannot pay, and meaning we're going to jeopardizing, the whole business model that they have promised their funders, for example, to make some return of investment. And I think to socialize this more to a private developer, because I think almost civil society organization is full 100% on this GESI integration, but very few program developers, private sector especially, seeing this as part of their business, because they see that this is an off-grid or community-based projects that is much more relevant. It's not actually. There are some ways where utility, for example, can actually improve this within their reports. How they can make visualizations of data, not only ratio of electrification or renewable energy mix, but also on how they can bring out some data, how many men and women are actually being electrified, how many women-headed households are actually within their user or their customers. So that kind of simple of showing that the data, the information is actually there, and the effort of making it happen is there, because that is the first step to coming into more, other intervention within GSC that's much more advanced, for example. Thank you.
Yeah, Pasang. So yeah, the question on sort of land grabs in the name of addressing climate change, which disproportionately affects indigenous people, especially women. How do we ensure safeguards against such things happening?
Yeah. This is the land grabbing is actually one of the critical issues in the hydropower projects, and also not one in the hydropower projects, but also many other projects. It's like especially the projects which is being driven like a business as usual model, a top-down approach with hardly consultation, or we have been calling like free, prior, informed consent with the meaningful participation and engagements of the indigenous people and local communities, women, youth on the ground. That kind of practices has hardly put into as a part of the culture. So still, if we see on the grounds, even in the hydropower sectors, if you allow me just my little knowledge on the hydropowers in the context of Nepal, like Upper Arun or Upper Trisuli, even Dudhkosi, while engaging part of my work with them, clearly shows that already the indigenous people, women and youth on the ground are already experiencing the negative impacts. Negative impacts in terms of land acquisition, especially forceful displacements, and also the land grabbing has been one of the fundamental issues we have been hearing from the stories and the experiences of the indigenous peoples, even women, youth on the ground. So I just would like to reflect back three parts. One part, especially in the context of Nepal, our government of Nepal, especially in the energy sectors, we do not have any safeguards, unfortunately. If you see our energy sectors on the safeguards, so most of the safeguards has been implemented through donor-driven projects. For example, like if you have a projects, funded by World Bank or or ADB or others funders, and in line with the safeguards, they try to fulfill that safeguards. But if it is led by the governments with the Nepal Electricity Authority and EA, there is no safeguards at all. So when there is no safeguards, how would you talk about the safeguards? No, how can you think about it? Your concerns being addressed, even you are displaced. And then another concern is also the main issues is. No land title ownership, no certificates. So, for example, in most of the hydropower projects in Nepal, like the study shows, at least 50 to 100% settlements of indigenous people in Nepal. But because of the no presence of the land certificate, because indigenous people have been living there for generation, but never realized you need to apply for the land certificate. And now, because you do not have land certificate, and then the problem here is like, even you have a compensation. As I said earlier, that compensation determined committee that is often led by a district officer, district officers, chief of the district officers, and unfortunately in that committee there is no presence of inclusiveness, no women's, no indigenous people, no youth, no local community, nothing. And supposedly it's supposed to have a project affected community to be there, but in the presence of the committee is from community is only the the local elected bodies, that is the representatives of the indigenous people and local communities, and you can realize how the voice is being passed through. So as I said, the policies having no safeguard policies in the energy sectors. Then another part is this committee has no inclusive policy. Then another part is a grievance mechanism. There is a grievance mechanism, especially in the funded projects. But the grievance mechanism also, the mechanism remains just the grievance mechanism. Just only you have a provision of, submit your grievances. But there's no mechanism, governance structures of indigenous people and the women's and youths in the mechanism to make a decision. So these are the different sectors that has been really, really traumatic experienced by indigenous people, women on the ground, especially in the sectors of the energy sector of the hydropower, and where displacements is often one of the cries out of the many indigenous people. And just to add one last sector, I see your hands. Displacement is not just only physical displacement, but there are spiritual connections, social, cultural values that has been connected for generations. And who is going to account for that one, no? It becomes just the, intangible heritage is one of the most attached part. And that has a basis for climate change resilience contribution. But that part is totally ignored. So that part where we need to really consider and think about it when we talk about the energy transition from the, from the indigenous people's perspective and gender perspective and youth and women perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sadia, yesterday when we were chatting, I was suggesting that one reason why probably civil society and private sector don't tend to be in the same room a lot of the time is because sometimes there's a perception, there's a lack of trust, perception of lack of trust, and that private sector get into these activities for greenwashing. And yet, you yourself, working in an electric company, you have taken a lot of initiative to implement various programs, including Roshni Baji's. Maybe you could describe what you have been trying to do on the inside to sort of empower women and children. So, yeah, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. So, on the question of trust, I mean, the risk of, and don't quote me back to my company, this is where the problem starts. So this is where the solution is also going to start from, which is why it is important for all of us to work together. And we don't have the option of not trusting each other, because as one of the professors in the earlier session kept saying, there is only one planet. On the earlier question, if I may just sort of take a brief moment on answering that, on the multiple work burden, I think we've crossed the triple work burden long ago. I do want to break down the gender stereotype. Believe it or not, there are many kinds of women in various stages of their life. There are young women. There are women who are nursing toddlers or infants. There are women at a later stage of life when their children are a lot more older, independent. There are women that are running households. There are women who have chosen not to. And in different stages of life, they would like to have the opportunity to make a choice to contribute in a way they want. Again, I mean, believe it or not, there are kinds of women. Some of us are ambitious. Some of us want to give back to society. Some of us don't. I think it's important to have that choice versus worrying too much that if we take the energy transition, and we've spoken a lot about this earlier in the day as well, that the prospects of the renewable transition and the fact that it's geographically most likely to happen in rural areas means that we need to put the considerations of the indigenous population up front. And we also need to make sure that we allow more women. Now, one of the biggest barriers for women, when they're working is, believe it or not, mobility. So if it's in your neighborhood and you're denied the opportunity, I think out of a concern that this may add to their burden is a bit, I think we need to make sure that we have the right policies and a right enabling environment to create awareness on how this would affect them per se, and then let them make that choice. The choice should always be there and available and theirs to make. Coming back to the Roshni Baji initiative, it's actually literally, light or lit sisters. And this kind of touches back on Sandra's point where, she raised a point about the power sector making these commitments as far as gender is concerned. So my company is one of the only ones in Pakistan that actually does a gender disclosure as well as the gender pay gap disclosure. It's not good, but once you put it in black and white, all the people in my company, particularly in HR, they wanted to fix it immediately. So that's always a good step. As far as financing is concerned, if we can make wage gap disclosures for gender mandatory, it would really, really make a huge difference. The Roshni Baji initiative is actually a program that we developed where these women who come from low-income backgrounds, they're given a little bit of training and they go door to door to create safety awareness. And we accidentally stumbled upon the fact that we don't know anything about our female customers. Our interaction and engagement on a day-to-day basis has always been with the person whose name the property is in, and therefore the meter is in the name of. And we had absolutely no idea. Now, he may be the customer, but my consumer is predominantly female, particularly when I look at my residential segment. They're the ones at home most of the time, particularly based on, I'm talking about the cultural aspect of South Asia. So when we started this conversation and then we evolved the program, and this is where we sat down with these Roshni Bajis, and we kept asking them, what have you learned today? How can we help? How can we make it better? And today, it's a 100 women strong community. Hopefully, it's going to be 150 by the end of next year. And we've started mapping our female customers. So we gave them an app. It was surprising for us. Most of them had never held a smartphone in life. So we taught them how to do data entry. We taught them how to, sort of deal with rejection, because you'd be door knocking. Not everybody wants to have a stranger showing up on their doorstep. They welcomed the fact that it was a female. The men in our workforce had absolutely dismal access up until this point, so kind of opened the door and allowed us to look inside. In 1 year, these women have allowed 30,000 households to be connected to the grid. They lived in peripheral urban areas and had no access to electricity, and they didn't know how to also because the distance was too far for them to cover. The men were busy at work, the women were at home, and they were hoping that at some point they will figure it out. But when the utility showed up at their doorstep, they really welcomed it. More importantly, these women talk about safety awareness, and that has reduced the amount of accidents related to electrical hazards. Poor wiring and illegal abstraction makes that a huge hazard. It's about 30% reduction in the deaths related to electrocution just by having this program. And I think the most important lesson that we learned was that, once you give them a voice, they start telling you back on what they need. We taught them how to open their bank accounts. Most of them didn't have any. We taught them how to use social media to market themselves. And we also gave them STEM training so that they actually become eligible for formal employment in our company and even any other company in the country. STEM-related education, I think, is the biggest barrier for women to join the energy sector, which is also something that Irina has highlighted, IEA has highlighted. So when we gave them this training, we could actually induct them into formal employment. And then we started rethinking, where can these women be placed? Now, in Pakistan, meters are read manually and all done entirely by a male population. So once these women were open to going to the field and door to door, they're more comfortable. So we now have the country's first female meter readers inducted through this program. We have women working at the grids, again inducted through this program. And we have women who are now looking at becoming linesmen. So we'll probably soon have women fixing electricity on the poles. Unheard of, but this is how we created the pipeline. And I think it's important that we not only have women leaders, but we also start building today the pipeline of the future leaders, women leaders, and we have to start today. So that's a little bit about Roshni Baji.
Well, it's commendable, and you were, in a way, responsible for driving that. And, I mean, my question then would be, is this sort of institutionalized into your organization? Or, assuming you move on to another position and someone new comes in, will there be continuity? And, is it something which can be replicated by the other electric companies?
So this is where advocacy comes in. I am a communications professional. So we work very closely with the regulator, and we have we've showcased the Roshni Baji program. In fact, just on Friday, these Roshni Bajis, they flew up to Islamabad and they stood in front of the entire power sector and they spoke about their journey in their own words. And they made an appeal, and the regulator turned around and said, this is something that we can replicate across Pakistan. So it's about creating these case studies and then pushing them forward. For me, it is an individual commitment that I have made. I am a first-generation corporate sector in my family. Women in my family, where I come from, we only had one purpose: grow up, reproduce. So I kind of said, I would like to go study. And they asked, why? I said, I'd like to do a job. There was quite the awkward pause. And so for me, where I come from and how I have gotten there, for me this is important, that women should have every opportunity available to them. And if they're given the chance, I think they can do a fantastic job. In terms of institutionalizing it, yes, like I said, we've put together a sustainability reporting mechanism in place, and this is where disclosures, reporting, targets, and incentives for healthy gender representation, they will automatically propel organizations forward, put them up, put the spotlight on them. So I think we've got the base set where I currently work, and hopefully it will sustain itself.
Right. Thanks. Very interesting to know. And I've also been, listening very carefully to what the panelists are saying, because Climate Action Network Southeast Asia, we are also part of a consortium which is about to embark on a 4-year project on implementing just energy transition in an active coal mining region in East Kalimantan, one of the provinces in Indonesia. And, it's a multi-consortium, it's a consortium comprising the International Labour Organization. Oh, echo. So there's the International Trade Union Confederation, CANC, Wuppertal Institute, which is a think tank. And CANC, I think, has got the most exciting part of the project, which is stakeholder engagement, stakeholder involvement. So that's our role. So it's going and getting the opinions of the communities, which are linked to the coal mining infrastructure, economically dependent on them, and getting their views and talking about just energy transition, and for them to create a vision and alternative livelihoods, better than where they are, better than where they are at present, based on their opinions. So the challenge is, it's not something, we need to really reach out to the women, the sort of vulnerable communities, people with disabilities, marginalized communities, the powerless. And these are not your constituencies who are going to come to a consultation in the office of the head of the administrative area, sit around the table, express their views. They got no time for this. They're too busy. So in a situation like that, how do we reach out to these communities? What are the methods, to access the voiceless, the powerless, the marginalized? How do we go? So maybe you can share some experiences on this.
Thank you. For Uganda as a country, how it's going on to get the voices even and to implement the gender inclusiveness, even at local level. The Ministry of Energy realized some gaps in access and use of energy and mineral resources, and this year they launched a gender strategy and action plan to respond to the concerns of access and use and all those inequalities in accessing energy products. And this energy strategy outlines a wide range of interventions from policy to practice at the local level. So it's one way which they are doing that. Then Uganda also has an energy capitalization credit company that works with financial institutions, and it encourages them to reserve 20% of the funds available for gender. And then this is followed down also to the grassroots. And there's a back and forth mechanism for that. Then there is also an Equal Opportunities Commission to assess the level of allocation of financial resources to gender equity and actions in the sector. Even every large project, before contractors come to the government for partnership, they must present a communication strategy for any project before entering in partnership with the ministry. I think that is about. Then also the social and impact assessment framework requires that there is participatory, like engaging and consultation process with the different kinds of gender, wherever this is going to be set up. So that is at country level. But then at institutional level, as ECHO is a very gender-sensitive organization. We have a gender policy, but then also out of the 44 staff of ECHO, 25 are male and 19 are female. The EDs are male, but 2 managers under him, directly under him, are female. So that is gender sensitivity. Then all the projects that we do as ECHO, we follow a human rights-based approach of inclusiveness, participation, equity. And then also our reporting is human rights results-based. And then we have data tools, even attendance lists, to capture, even when we are mobilizing for trainings or outreaches for renewable energy or for renewable energy projects, we have to capture male, female, the sex, and then the years from which we capture the youth, the elderly, the different categories, people with disabilities. We have a section for people with disabilities, and then even marginalized communities, because ECHO works with the underserved communities in Uganda. So maybe I responded at country level, but then also at institutional level.
Yeah. So the question is how to get meaningful participation, right? Basically. In our experience, when you want to invite specific target groups, especially women, we usually send out invitations separately between men and women first. So there is a specific meeting only for the fathers and only specific meeting only for the mothers. Why? Because in many occasions, women will not going to say much when it comes to they see, oh, their husband is there. So when it comes to, okay, what is, the need of specific women, they won't, those kind of needs won't actually being spilled out. So in doing separation meeting, we'll encourage them to speak out. That's one. And second, choose the right time when they are actually not busy with the household chores. Do not send invitation in the morning because they are very busy preparing for family meals. Probably the best time is after lunch. When the lunch is already being prepared, they are just waiting for their husbands coming back home from the field. That is the right time for inviting them to have a special meeting to get their the needs and voice going out. And as well as a typical mothers in the community, they always bring children with them. And actually that's a distractions of its own, because little children tends to dragging along and then crying, so you won't get that kind of meaningful participations from the women if that's the case. So what we can do is that we provide a small playing corner for the children. So there is this coloring books, whatever, so that the mothers can actually paying attention on what we are saying and then what we want to get from them, and peacefully, and they can say more about that. So I think that's some of my, and for example, if we want to have more inclusions, then maybe for the indigenous, Pasang could say more about that. For the disabled or elderly, that's also the case. You have to really come to their houses specifically, and then ensuring them that there are support for getting them to actually come to the event. Yeah, thank you.
Is this the same question? Or is there? Okay. I think, just to begin with these questions, with the JESI as a tool, or there has been, because I also teach in the university. I teach the same subject, JESI, one of the topic. So I have been charged from my students that, oh, ma'am, you are focusing more on indigenous peoples rather women, no? So but in general perspectives, no, when we see in a development approach, even in the government policy, most of the time we have a JESI policy. But that has been more focusing on gender, no? And then social inclusion part is often missed out. So sometimes we are more focused on social inclusion, not gender. Sometimes gender and not social inclusion. So this kind of dichotomy, this kind of, not making holistically incorporation of both gender and inclusion issues is hardly been felt in realization into practice. So this is need to be considered very closely, that one part. Then another part is even in the gender, even in the women in general, need to be seen from the diverse perspectives, no? Especially like in the case of the hydropower projects, that we have seen like, okay, we have a women and local communities, indigenous people, but there is no indication like a target group who are affected from that projects, no? Why we need particular groups. So that part is yet to be incorporated, it need to be reflected. Because, within the group also, we need to see from intersectional perspectives, like even within indigenous people also, there are different groups who are more affected, no? Even if you see like a land acquisition, sectors, that poorest of the poor are most vulnerable, even within indigenous people, no? So that need to be looked out very carefully. And then another part is, in the energy sector, in the hydropower, the small sectors need to be really, really empowered, rather the big dam, no, that has negative consequences. And especially for the small hydropowers or small projects would not only be approached by the community, but also it protects the environment. It protects our culture, our values. We don't need to displace. At least you attach to your roots. So that part need to be seen very, very carefully, very closely. That part. And then finally, we really need to change our perception, perspectives. I am a mother of 2 girls and 1 son. No? We really need to see like how you bring your children, how you bring your community, how you bring your whole nation, no? Or even in the global scenario. That often or less, most of the time, like we presume like women know nothing, this kind of attitude. Because I just shared my my experience that I work as a from the indigenous people representative in the Ministry of Forest Environment in the RED Implementation Center in the past 6 years. And then I could sit there as a woman, as an indigenous person, in the presence of all full of men. No, and that was my experience in the past. Now it's been already more than 10, 12, 15 years, I think. But those days, in 2008, 2009, when I just started working in this sector, that the perception was so important. But slowly, you work, you see, you realize, and then see like, woman and indigenous person can also contribute, no? This kind of perception is really, really need to be developed right from the beginning, right from home, right from society, right from nation, right at the global discourse, no? Because this is very dangerous, because our perception has been shaped from these modern perspectives, no? Modern Western values, no? Where especially in the development developed country approach, and within development country, the indigenous people, and within groups, women's, this kind of sectors, different layers, the perceptions, perspectives needs to be changed from indigenous worldviews, women's worldviews, youth worldviews. Then only we can have a just energy transaction. Yeah, thank you.
So I think all points are already covered. So I'll just add one point. In my experience, whenever we wanted to take the women's opinion, we find it a lot more convenient to get one of the women from the community to host the conversation. If the space is familiar, they don't have to venture out too far. And it's one of them, hosting it. They're a lot more likely to open up. And they're a lot more comfortable. It's a lot less cumbersome for them to take their children elsewhere, because generally the kids are then out and about playing in the neighborhood. So that's just all I wanted to add.
It's time now to open the discussion to the floor, to you all, and whether welcome your ideas, which could be country specific, or maybe from the perspective of governments as to how you view addressing social inclusion and gender equity in just energy transition. So, or if you have any specific questions you would like to direct to the panel, so we're opening up the floor for questions. And we already have one hand. Could we have a mic going to her? Yeah, and two hands. Just as the mic is going to you, I also want to raise the issue of shrinking space for civil society. I come from Southeast Asia. It's getting quite challenging for civil society organizations to operate. That's one. And the other thing is also, with regard to just energy transition, does everyone have a similar view on it? And I think a definition on what just energy transition also is very important. Because, recently in September, the energy ministers of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, had a meeting together with their counterparts from Japan, Korea, and China. And the statement which they came up with interpreted just energy transition completely opposite to what we have in mind. Like just energy transition is continuity and ensuring continuity in fossil fuels. Sustainable financing is ensuring continued financing for fossil fuels. 13 references to gas, 11 references to civilian nuclear energy. So that's the situation in which we are functioning within in Southeast Asia, just to put that on the table as well. Please go ahead.
Hello to all. It was a really wonderful session and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So my question is basically, yes, we need women in the policy-making table and decision-making level, but I also realized at one point that people at the decision-making level are at much advantageous position. I mean, we have had access to education, we are working, so the level where we are at is not necessarily equal to people on the field or in the rural sector especially. So I feel like there's a gap. Although I am in an energy policy maker position, do I have all the data that I need to make informed decision? Because sometimes even I find, like somebody asked me, have I ever experienced harassment in my workspace? I have not, because honestly, I'm at a position where it's not really easy to harass me, So, but then it cannot be said the same for other people who are can be bullied and can be harassed. So I may not be in a position to give that exact information. Okay, yes, there are gender issues or GESI issues in my sector or in my country. So my question here is, we definitely see the need of having a data have you, any of you, come across, a program where such data collections are in place, or so that I think people here who want to have that sort of data in their countries, I think it would benefit them. And also, my other question is, people working in energy sector, like ma'am from Pakistan correctly mentioned, like, it's tough position, and then you have to be there 100%. So sometimes women, especially in high intensive sectors, are sometimes they have to choose, is it career or family? So, do you have any recommendations on how that sort of issues can be addressed as well? Because it's never men asked, you want career or you want to look after your family? So usually that question is put upon the female. So any recommendations or ideas how that can be tackled? Thank you.
You had a question? Yeah.
In fact, I do not have any question, but I have a comment. That we are talking about the inclusion of women in decision making. I think rather it is better to articulate in this way, that inclusion of proper people, proper stakeholder in the decision making. Because that, say, for when we work for awareness raising for energy efficiency improvement and conservation in the household level, then most important stakeholders are the women, because traditionally they are responsible of cooking and managing the houses. But if we look for the industrial sector, where women are not yet in percentage is very big in number, it is better to articulate in that irrespective of gender, we should reach to the targeted stakeholder. And that could be the better way of saying that inclusion or inclusive policy formulation or decision making. Yeah, that is my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Thomas and Michael. Yeah, Thomas first. Yeah.
Thanks, Niti. One of the things that I did notice what Sadia said, again, this is not a question but a comment. One of the things that I noticed that Sadia said is that the energy sector is one of the fourth worst as far as the third worst, okay, as far as gender inclusivity is concerned. And I think if we were to look within the energy sector, I think it would be the fossil fuel sector that would be the worst, in that. So when we are talking of a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, when we are talking of 100% renewable energy practice, policy, and experience, I think, one of the things that we really need to highlight is how can we also transition from the discriminatory processes that the fossil fuel industry practices to a much better, non-discriminative, inclusive policy that the renewable energy sector can, follow. And to add to that, I believe, Niti, as you said, very often we hide behind the fact that, the clean energy is fighting climate change, and because of which we can, we can sort of justify why we are being non-inclusive and, without including especially the indigenous people, because the experience has been that when we have large renewable energy projects, we invariably, tamper on the rights of the indigenous people and the women and the poor and the, disabled. Now, I think we really need to be careful about that, and I really go back to the session that we had yesterday on decentralized energy and, distributed renewable energy, wherein somebody very rightly said that small is still beautiful. And I think that is exactly what we heard from the session today. We can continue to move into a renewable energy future that, does not trample on human rights, it does not trample on other. And as in can, as we always say, there cannot be energy justice without human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And Michael, that'll be the final comment for this session. Please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I question. Thank you, first of all, for that excellent session. And I learned about the inclusion of GESI issues into decision-making, but also in practical action. So my question would be an economical one. There is several studies showing that transferring money to women actually leads to better social and environmental and also sustainability impacts. Are you aware of any programs now in the just energy transition scope where also the economic ownership of women in owning also assets like renewable generation capacity is strengthened through any incentives, like, for example, I don't know, lower interest rates for concessional loans or a premium on a feed-in tariff or something like that? Is anything like that existence that strengthens the ownership of women also economically? That would be interesting.
Thanks very much. And so we had 2 comments and 2 questions. And maybe what I'll do is I'll ask all the panelists, starting with you, Sadia, to respond. And maybe also, as you respond to any of the questions, and give your concluding remarks as well, as briefly as possible.
Okay. So to the first question, spot on about privilege and bias. It is there, and we have to actively fight it. Which is why I point that you need to sit down with the communities, let the communities, the indigenous populations, the disabled, the marginalized, the women, the low-income women, speak for themselves and let them work. You know, I'm going to give a female metaphor. You know, just how they say no 2 pregnancies are the same. Neither are 2 women. So neither are 2 communities. So it is going to be different every single time. Learn, apply, but be flexible, because you will come up with a different answer almost every time. I look at, I mean, I'm working in my city, but we've divided the work we do in 6 pockets because we identified that each community based on Karachi is multi-ethnic, so depending on which ethnicity that area centers on, they had different ways that we approached them, different times of the day, and down to the method of greeting. So again, you have to play by ear, and it has to be very conscious. The other thing that you talked about, sexual harassment in the workplace, it is definitely a concern. And as more and more women join the workplace, I think the workplace becomes a slightly safer space. There is strength in numbers, so we should all strive to do that, which is why when we did the Roshni Baji program, we didn't do 10, 15, 20. We started with 40, then we went to 60, and we're continuously scaling up. So shared experiences and sort of kind of, you know, that body of, you know, that sorority sort of is also quite intimidating. That said, we need to have grievance mechanisms in place. Pasang's already talked about them in detail, so I'm not going to go a lot into them. I will. So, sir, again, good comment about fossil fuels being the massive laggard in the entire sector. So if you sort of transition, there's automatically greater representation of female, given the fact that PV sector is really going on. We had a very lovely session, by the way, yesterday with Prashant on, it was about transportation and EV policy, but we all concluded is that we need to go micro, not macro. So a lot of the conversation here that was happening about the indigenous people being sort of forcefully displaced, and it is a huge problem. I take that as one of the most, saddest takeaways, but also one that we need to work on. And I think we need to end, this is what I'm going to, Prashant, no more mega dams. We should make them smaller, community-owned, and within their spaces to address this problem of land grabbing. That's my take on it. And finally, Michelle, to your question, there is a project in Pakistan that I know of, which is called Pink Turbines. It's 100% women-owned. The sad news is that they're struggling with funding. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's a small, I think, less than 50 megawatts turbine, based on in the city of Karachi. So maybe somebody here can talk about it. My last comment on data portal is that we work with Bloomberg has a gender portal. It's a gender equity index. I don't know how publicly available the data is. It's free of cost to upload your information. I think that should, it's a good place to start, and maybe the other panelists can give you other answers. I think I've given whatever I could.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and also your thoughts for the reflection on our on the panels. I just noted down a few things that I may not. I will try my best to respond the one that in line with what I said. So I totally agree with most of the remarks that you have shared. No doubt that is we wish for. That is the reality on the ground, and then we wish to change it, because every challenge is, I believe there is an opportunity, and opportunity we can do in solidarity. That is what I want to reflect. The absence of the disaggregated data, especially, is a very, very important to be filled out, because I was also involved in a couple of recent analysis of the benefit sharing mechanism in the carbon financing in Asia also. When I was working on that report for the World Bank, I realized due to the disaggregated data absence, a lot of things is very difficult to deal with. I mean, how many hectares of the land's been, managed by the customarily managed forests, or what are the traditional governance system that is still existence. This kind of, and what is the role of women, what is the role of indigenous people. So it's a really dire of this kind of data if we really want to fill the gap, and we really need to put our efforts on that part. I really like the one questions, especially, when we choose our career or family, this is a very challenging, for the working mother like us, because when you work, all your burdens as a mother is carrying over. You are mom, you are workers, you are so many things there. But I want to make sure to raise our children, because I said I'm also mother of 2 daughters. I want to say we can balance. Nothing is impossible, and we can care for our family, but at the same time we can care for our career. So we need to balance, and that's how I brought up my life. I did my master's after my marriage. I did my MPhil. I did my PhD. I'm working full-time mom, and along with my children. So this is what we need to move on. I mean, we should not kind of dichotomy of working career or family. We have to balance both. That is what my message for that. And then the other part, I really like the idea of small is beautiful, because I before I come here, we had a meeting in my work that one of my colleagues was saying there are already big protests on the ground for expansion against the bigger hydropowers by the indigenous peoples, because the hydropower will stop having the fish. Fish is one of the very, very it's very necessary for our cultural, our social, our spiritual values, especially for many indigenous communities. So this is another part on the ground which is going on. And then the last part, for the economic aspects. Now we really need to think about it, the principle of etik and imic is really dear to me, because we have wealth of knowledge on the ground, but we always try to seek solution outside. So this is the time that we talk about paradigm shift, we talk about transformational change, but the transformational change and paradigm shift can take place when you go to listen to your roots on the ground. So I just give you a very short example. Do I have time or no? Okay, we don't have time. So I'll give this example when we meet in the section. And then the last principles, last core values that before I pass on, that human right-based approach should be the basis for energy transformation and people in the center. Thank you.
Yeah. For the question addressing for the data available, I think there are some of website international that has gathered between gender and women, gender and energy. The first one maybe I can recommend is go to the gender and energy data from the IEA, the International Energy Agency. They have one. the Global Women's Network for Energy, they also did some survey a couple of years ago about that. Go check. The Catalyst, that there is also data on women energy. And lastly is IRENA. I think about last year or recently this year, they issue a solar PV sector worldwide about women in solar PV. So there are also recommendations among others of the data that they issued. Secondly, about the transition, I want to address on that. I think you cannot expect a drastic transition from fossil fuel to renewable. The technology alone cannot be like that. You know, it cannot be happen within 10 years. That's also the case for GESI, for gender inclusions, because I think it needs to have a step, you know, from awareness and then do no harm until the end of the stage, which is transformation. Now, the missing, it is how to institutionalize it, is that maybe in every country has that kind of gender mechanism or policy in place, but the lack, this has happened in Indonesia, the lack is actually on the how-to, the guidelines on to do it, the tools, you know, to help the stakeholders in assessing, you know, their current practice, for example, whether they are already gender mainstream or gender inclusive or not. So I think take a baby step, you know, as simple as we getting into that first step is also the key to start. The third one for the question from Michael on the economic, HIVOS implement I think around 90 kiosks for solar charging in the village, and 50% that is still currently running at this stage is actually being owned by women. So the other 50% that is what was failing is actually mostly being managed by men. So indeed, correct. I would like to make that strong point that we are women here. We are much more meticulous. We are a better manager than men. And actually that is what happened on the ground when it comes to energy management in the community. However, unfortunately, I have never seen, you know, the kind of successful rate when it comes to ownership, you know, what kind of income that they use is actually owned by women. Whether they can have that kind of income to access more financing, for example, and how much bigger is that kind of data, you know, available out there. I have never found that actually, Michael. It would be good to do some research around it, because it will go into strong point on why we need to pay attention on women as well. However, there are programs from microfinance institutions in Indonesia, for example, that is targeting for women. I think maybe in Nepal and India as well, there are several programs as well in that case, and it is successful because their kind of returns rate is 90%, you know, being paid. Yeah, there's very minimal default payment in that regards. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just respond to the one on women, economic ownership of women and its contribution to empowerment. In Uganda, women have proved to be good stewards of money, and the indigenous women usually get money through Village Savings and Loans Association at village level, or associations or circles. But even during the monitoring and evaluation, they go into, when they get a loan out of the circle or as an individual and going to renewable energy, setting up solar panels for charging, maybe phones at a fee or ABC value chain development. Usually for women compared to men, as a platform for Uganda, we've not conducted studies on this, but for the projects, even the other projects we implement with other partners, the women have really been good stewards of money, and they've been empowered through the transferring this money that they get from government programs or within their savings or support from CBO, Startup Capital, or from CSOs. Thank you.
Thank you. So all that's left for me to do is thank our wonderful panelists here, Sadia, Pasang, Sandra, and Dilys, and you know, for the excellent inputs, and also like to thank the audience for your active participation and for joining this session. So thank you all very much, and please join me in giving the panelists a round of applause. And back to you. Over to you, Raju.
Thank you, Niti, and the panelists for this excellent job. It was very good, rich discussions. Well, I think there's a photograph being taken, so you might want to pay attention there. But while that is being done, just wanted to let you know that we have, in about half an hour, we will wrap up our 2 days conference. In fact, this was the last technical session that we had for this conference. It has been very rich discussions, lot of technical stuff, even the very vibrant and lively participation. We had about 18 countries here representing virtually and also in person. Together in the hall, we had one time almost a maximum of 105 people in the room, which is, I think, it's not a bad number to have in this setting. Also, we had 50 virtual participants as well. So it's been a really good interactions and engagement in this event. Of course, in the beginning, we started with a very overarching presentation. It was giving why the importance of moving into low-carbon future. 100% renewable energy was very key for us, looking at the global scenario, talking about climate science and that sort of stuff. We started with a very broad and overarching session, but then gradually we moved into just transition issue. We talked about energy mix, but then we gradually entered into policy aspects, what kind of policies were country really implementing and then going forward with that. But also we talked about scenarios, like whether that is possible or not. So, and we also looked into the financing of renewable energy, or looking at the session here, gender and social inclusion, which was very key. So we did try in this 2 days of conference. I understand that you are very tired, a lot of things to absorb. There's a lot of information to absorb, but I'm sure that you have had a good interactions, and there's a lot of interlinking, and then learning will continue in the future. Having said that, well, we tried our best as organizers to also have a very balanced panelist. So you might have noticed that in all the panels we tried to have gender balance very much, also regional balance, country representations as well. But also looking into the diversity of our stakeholders. We have government officials, we have private sector, media, research and academia, and like youth and students. So we really wanted to make this very multi-stakeholder. The map itself is multi-stakeholder engagement that we are looking forward is something we want to achieve. And I think just for my part that it's been really a good and very interactive session. So now we move into the closing session of this. And just one notice would be that some of you might be wondering whether you would want to have this PPT that will be presented here. For all the participants, we will send them to you via email. So I mean, you just be sure that we will do that. If not, then just give us an email, then we will definitely do that. With that, now just wanted to thank from my side and then invite Arati from WWF Nepal to initiate our closing session. Arati, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rajuji. Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had an insightful, interesting experience at the conference and a lovely stay at Nepal. So to start with the closing session, I request Mr. Navraj Dhakal, Deputy Executive Director of APC, Government of Nepal, to come to the dais to chair the session. A round of applause for Dr. Dhakal. I would like to request now Dr. Joel Hivanet, Deputy Head of Delegation, European Union, to come to dais. I will call upon Ms. Aarti Gurung, Head of Program Development and Monitoring, WWF Nepal, to come to dais, please. Finally, I would like to call Ms. Salma Al-Gamal, Project Manager at World Future Council Germany, to join the dais. With 2 days of rigorous discussion, we'd like to first hear from a few participants on their experience, For this, may I request Siddiqui Zubair from Bangladesh. Can someone give mic to Mr. Zubair? You have 2 minutes to.
This is the last opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you, the guest of closing session, and my fellow participants from different countries, from government agencies, private sector, experts, academicians, students, and media people. It was an excellent experience for me to be here, and thank you, the organizers, the APC, Prakriti Center, as well as the WWF for give this opportunity for being here and say something in front of you. And heard about that, it was when I got the invitation, I was really surprised that what dared to move forward now with 100% renewable energy. And from this 2 days very rich session, now I am confident that yes, may not be possible today, but it will be possible not in long term, but in short and medium term. It is possible, and it must made possible. Otherwise, we cannot move forward. If we cannot ensure the existence of the human civilization, then how we can think about the development? So for the existence, we have to accept the reality, and we have to move forward with 100% renewable energy program. May not be equally applicable in all countries in one point of time, but if we desire to move together, what I said yesterday also, then it will be possible. And thank you, organizers, for organizing such a beautiful program and well-managed program, I said. That everything was well managed, starting from the airport to receive the guests, and then to organize everything, this venue, sessions, and ensure the presence of all resource persons, all the speakers. This is really wonderful job they done. In most of the cases, what I found that some of the guests are missing. Okay, the last takeaway that we heard many things, but what I found that in this program, I don't see not any politicians, political leaders who are absent, which is very important. Why? Because with my experience, I can say that with the expert, academicians, the practitioners, we are very much convinced. But if we cannot convince our politicians, then it is very difficult to move forward with renewable energy. Why? It is because they come for a short tenure. They like to achieve everything within that particular time. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years maximum. Not more than that. And which might not be possible with renewable energy. So we have to bring them on board. We have to convince them, not as a party in power, but with all the politicians, because in cycle they will come forward. And thank you very much again for inviting me and give this opportunity to say something in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Zubair. Now I'd like to request Avril De Torres from Philippines to summarize her experience in 2 minutes. Can you pass on the mic, please?
Yes, I'd rather stay here in my seat. So I was asked to share reflections just for 2 minutes. I would say it's been a knowledge-packed 2 days filled with a lot of data and graphs, but also a lot of concrete experiences on the ground. And I have a lot to take home and you know, reflect on and share with my other colleagues in the Philippines and see how we can apply these policies and programs and experiences in our own contexts. I specifically appreciate the flow of the discussions we've had, starting from a global perspective and then going into specific country energy mixes and then going into more a community and ground level programs and project implementation when it comes to distributed RE, cooking and transportation. And the second day has been quite insightful and also inspirational when we went into thematic discussions, especially the last panel on Jesse. So that's a very hopeful session to end on. Of course, we have this concluding panel as well. I was asked if there's anything that I would have also wanted to hear more. So I guess on that note, I would have appreciated learning more about lessons from the energy crisis. I know it's something that's impacting all of us, but disproportionately, those who are more reliant on imported fossil fuels are suffering more now. But those who are about to run out with indigenous supply will have to confront these issues sooner or later, and that's what's about to happen in the Philippines. We're about to run out of indigenous natural gas, and we're seeing how this crisis can create opportunities as well, an opportunity to highlight that renewable energy is the solution, but also a venue for regressive policies to come into play. So something that we've been hearing is mothballed coal projects being revived in other parts of the globe. We're hearing this in Germany, or we're hearing a new deep coal mine being allowed for the first time in 30 years in the UK. And even in the Philippines, we're seeing more coal projects being promoted as a solution for this energy crisis. So how do we counter these regressive policies and actually take this opportunity to fast-track renewable energy? But other than that, I have gained a lot from this two-day experience, and I also echo what was shared earlier. I want to thank the organizers for the generosity and hospitality and for creating opportunities for us to experience the local culture and know more about Nepal. So congratulations to the organizers, and thank you as well to all of the panelists who have been so generous with their knowledge.
Thank you, Ms. Torres, for sharing your reflection as well as giving us feedback. Lastly, I would request Mr. Prem Sagar Subedi from Nepal.
Namaste, good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for organizing this very relevant and timely international conference on 100% renewables. So bringing the team from more than 18 countries together from the different sectors, academia, government, private sector, civil society organizations, development partners is not easy, but the organizers have done of bringing them together and like sharing the experience from different countries. So it is really nice and useful for all of us. As we know, like there is no way other way than going for 100% renewables. It's a vision. It may not be achieved 100%, but it is always good to have a vision so that we can move our steps towards that. So for that, we also learned that the resources are scarce. So with the limited resource, we have to be more innovative and smart on utilizing all those resources. And also we learn from the different countries that there are already been innovative approaches and practices. This is just a matter of like understanding, packaging and sharing so that we can learn from each other. We know that this is not a very simple thing. It's a multidisciplinary subject and also invites for the multi-stakeholder engagement. So there is a need for balancing. So we need to balance between the growth and environmental concerns. we need to balance between the subsidies and then the market-based instruments. We need to balance between the reasonable returns and then the proper benefit to poor and disadvantaged. Otherwise, we cannot bring all the stakeholders together to work on this very good sort of a vision of creating 100% renewable. So this is the time, and then we can learn from the experience of different countries on how the different countries are doing on balancing these things. So lastly, for the international participants, so I hope you all had a very good time in Nepal, and if you have time and you can go outside Kathmandu and know the real Nepal, because visiting Kathmandu and making a perception of Nepal may not be fair. So if you have time, maybe you can go. Otherwise, there is always a next time. And from all the Nepali colleagues, I would like to say safe home back to all of you. Again, thank you for organizing this event for the organizers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subedi, for sharing your thoughts. Now, I would like to request Ms. Salma Al-Gamal to summarize the discussion and key highlights of the 2 days of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arati. I would also like to thank the hosts and the government of Nepal for hosting us here in Nepal, and also I would like to congratulate you all for a very, very successful conference. The conference had 7 sessions, which all of them were very important, and I think all the outcomes and discussions and the topics that were addressed are of importance. So I really hope I can at least summarize the majority of them so we have an overview that we can take with us and work with the outcome of this conference to move forward towards 100% renewable energy. So yesterday the sessions were rather on the country experiences. We heard about several projects, about financing, about the inclusion of people, about education, and the deployment of renewable energy. Today we went rather into details about specific technical aspects in this process, and I really enjoyed also the last session about the gender aspect, which is one crucial part of moving towards a just energy transition. And this is exactly the first point that I would like to start with in my summary of the conference. And I'm happy to emphasize it again, even though we just talked about it, the meaning of a just energy transition. So it is not just about energy and changing from a fossil fuel towards a renewable energy. It is about inclusion. It is about saving the rights of the people. It is about having a life standard for everyone that is satisfying, that is safe, that everybody has access to health, that everybody has a safe working place. I can go on and on and on in that list, but it is really about the people, and to not forget anyone. It is about the whole world. We are working together on this, and no one should be left behind. For that, I would also like to emphasize the importance of awareness raising. This is part of the just energy transition, of course, the inclusion of people and for them to understand what it means, renewable energy, to have their support and to have their knowledge to find appropriate solutions, and to share the knowledge with them so they really know what they're working on, why this is happening. And I think this is a way to accelerate the renewable energy transition from the micro level, so a bottom-up approach. And a part of the people inclusion are also young people. Young people, they will be the ones who have to live with the consequences of our current behavior. So I think this is one of a crucial component of a just energy transition, to have young people's voices heard, to have their ideas and to exchange with them about how we can find sustainable solutions to maintain a just energy transition. Furthermore, a very important part that was mentioned and discussed during the conference is the infrastructure improvement for the communities. We cannot just implement renewable energy without providing them the right appliances, the right infrastructure to really have an affordable energy transition for the communities. And apart from that, it is also necessary to support the professional development of everybody, and like starting from the basic education and access to education towards renewable energy professional development, to have leaders with the knowledge of a green transition, green energy in this field. And I think one of the major parts, and this is what was discussed during the conference, it is the international support. So it's not only a regional, a national problem, it is an international concern, and we should all work together on this. And this is particularly important also for financial support and investment. We have to help each other to de-risk investment and to provide financial support to have a just energy transition worldwide. And on this regard, I think one of the most important parts, and it's now on my list, it's the last point, but it's not less important, is the policy making. So we should move with a science-based and evidence-based policy making with all of the previously mentioned points concerned and regarded. And this will also only be possible with a joint effort towards that mutual endeavor. I would like to summarize all in one major takeaway that I could take from this conference. I see, like, we are all from so unique and various backgrounds, be it geographically, socially, economically. And every one of us has so much unique knowledge and experiences that are so valuable for everybody else to learn from and to use. And I think this is exactly it. We are living on one planet. It is our planet, it is our world. And to save it and to preserve it and to have a sustainable life, we need to work together to get there. Otherwise, it won't be impossible. And through partnerships, and this is what the conference is about, through partnerships we can learn from each other on several levels, on all levels, and use that different and diverse knowledge to really find a solution that is sustainable and can move the future towards a resilient world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ilgamal, for capturing key highlights of all the sessions. Now I'd request Dr. Joel Hivenett to share a few words with us.
Thank you very much. Namaste and good afternoon, everybody. In fact, I was supposed to attend the introductory session of this conference, but I could not because I was invited to the opening of the International Film Festival, International Human Rights Film Festival in Kathmandu. And very aptly, actually, the theme for this year is climate justice. So I do see a link between what you have been discussing for those past 2 days and what is happening in another part of the city. I caught the end of the discussions during the last panel, and some of the speakers actually refer to this issue of human rights. So I think it's very, as I said, interesting to see that those preoccupations seem to be converging here in Kathmandu. But I want to thank, first of all, the organizers of this conference for inviting me today. I hope I can make a few remarks that you will not have discussed or heard before, coming from more a European Union dimension. So I think, first of all, that this conference was a very useful opportunity to bring international experts together. And I've heard just now that you all have very different backgrounds and you come from different countries, albeit, you know, in the Asia region. And I think it's very important to discuss, you know, some of the challenges that you're facing, but also share your experience of some of the policies that might be in place in your respective countries, plans and strategies at national and regional levels in order to promote 100% renewable energy. So I believe also that this conference will contribute significantly to Nepal's aspiration to minimize emissions and sustainably achieve net zero emissions by the year 2045, which is actually better than our own target in the European Union. And and the way you want to reach this objective is by improving energy efficiency, maximizing benefits, by utilizing clean energy efficiently in the residential, industrial, and transportation sectors as well. But I guess we'll be hearing a little bit more in a minute. And I also take this opportunity to congratulate Alternative Energy Promotion Center, Government of Nepal, for its leadership role towards developing and promoting renewable energy technologies in Nepal since its establishment in 1996. So, I mean, I think you can be seen also as precursors of the discussions that you've had yesterday and today. Now, I'm very happy to recall that the 15 million euros renewable energy project funded by the EU and implemented by AEPC has been continued in various forms, promoting renewable energy options in Nepal, in line with Nepal's nationally determined contribution ambition under the Paris Agreement to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. We're very keen to continue to, as EU, to provide the necessary support to the government of Nepal and other key stakeholders, such as the private sector and civil society organizations, in their efforts to improve energy access for all its citizens and to export energy in the future. So I'm pleased to announce that together with GIZ, the EU will be further strengthening its partnership with the AEPC under a new EU action called Green Recovery and Empowerment with Energy in Nepal, with a very apt acronym GREEN. This will boost the private sector's investment into renewable energy and the energy efficiency market as a viable pathway towards achieving a climate-neutral, resilient, sustainable, and inclusive society. So I understand that you discussed 7 themes during this conference, all of them of equal importance, but I would like to highlight 2 of them that really caught my attention. The first was session 1 on advancing just energy transition for achieving net zero emissions, because I think it demonstrated the need to accelerate the energy transition for energy security and ensuring stable energy prices in many countries in the world, especially in the context of the energy crisis caused by the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And the second session that I want to highlight was the last session, session 7, addressing social inclusion and gender equity, because it's very important to take into account gender disparities in the energy sector. And as I said, I caught the end of your discussion. I want to also highlight that the challenge, of gender disparities is not the same whether you live in a city or in rural parts of the country. And I believe that actually Nepalese women living in rural areas face a particular challenge where they do not have access to information, they do not have access to those renewable energies that we're talking about. And they also suffer primarily from the negative impact of fossil fuels. For example, in the households, using traditional biomass has an impact on their health. And also they seem to be spending an incredible amount of time collecting wood also for fire. So in fact, by bringing renewable energy to Nepal and by making sure that it is accessible to all, I think you will also contribute to improving the lives of women in the rural areas in Nepal and in other parts of the world. So, of course, there is a need to develop specific programs to address such inequalities and ensure, as was mentioned before, the equal and meaningful participation of women in the energy transition. So the EU global commitment to the access to sustainable energy for all by 2030, as well as the gender dimension and the energy transition, are also part of two Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 5, which is about gender equality, and SDG 7, which is about affordable and clean energy. So this is also to catch up on what was said by the previous speaker, that you can only address global challenges together, and it's of particular importance that we keep the multilateral system at the core of all our efforts. So I think I'm going to stop here with a brief mention of our EU Green Deal, because we in Europe are facing similar challenges to the ones that you are facing in Asia. So we are trying to transform this energy crisis that we're facing into an opportunity to boost research and development, and by rolling out, sustainable energy, and in particular renewable energy. So events such as this conference, I think, are extremely useful in helping us achieve our shared goals to promote 100% renewable energy for a green, resilient, inclusive, sustainable development, economic prosperity, and poverty reduction. So today I just wanted to assure you that the European Union is absolutely on the same line as Nepal, and then we will continue to support you in your efforts. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hivanet, for your insightful remarks. Next, I'd like to call Ms. Arti Gurung to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing team.
Thank you, Arati. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we've come to the end of this intensive two-day international conference on 100% renewable energy policy, practice, and experience. So I come from WWF, where we talk about one planet, like my colleagues here just mentioned, and we have a vision where humans live in harmony with nature. And with 100% renewable vision, which seems a step at a time, is also a right direction to this harmonious nature, the planet that we're looking forward. So I see a lot of information and data and like intense, insightful discussion in these 2 days in over 7 sessions. I've given this pleasure and privilege to thank you all for your time and energy here. So firstly, I would like to thank none other than our own Alternative Energy Promotion Center, AEPC, Dr. Madhusudan Adhikari, Executive Director, and Nawaraj Jakal for taking leadership in organizing this conference, which is very meaningful. I would also like to thank Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation Nepal for coordination and collaboration, without which this wouldn't have possible. Likewise, Professor Dr. Shubhakar Thakal from AIT, Thailand, for his keynote speech. And also Dr. Jolie Hivonet, for your gracious presence and support, and the EU delegation for this. And now I would like to thank all our moderators of 7 sessions for conducting this engaging session. I would not take all the names. I know we all are tired. So I'll just move on. I would also like to thank and acknowledge all our panelists. Amazing. For their time and energy to, share and have this engaging dialogue. Of course, special thanks to our 4 presenters, I guess, for sharing their knowledge again, virtually and in person. I would also like to thank a representative from provincial government. I hope some of us are here. And media personnel in this time and age for their news coverage. Thank you so much. And then all of you here, participant, I heard there's like from 18 country participation, virtually, physically. Thank you so much for your patience and, you know, like enthusiasm. It seems like it hasn't ended, it's just started. So thank you for your patience and energy. Huge thanks to technical team, amazing, that we can see all, hear all, not within this room, but outside the world too. Thank you so much for live streaming as well. And then, thank you Yakeniti Hotel for good food, good logistic, and great space. I love the space always, so thank you Yakeniti. Lastly, but not least, German government, BMZ, for supporting this map project, and our own map project team, World Future Council, Bread for the World, Prakriti Resource Center, and WWF together. So thank you so much and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kurung. Finally, I would request Mr. Navraj Akal to share his remarks and also close the session. I'll also take leave now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Artiji. The colleagues on the dais and all the distinguished delegates, we are already overrun with the time, and everything has been told, so I don't have anything to add. That's why my job is very simple, very easy, pretty straightforward. But as we have been discussing, we just have only one world, only one earth, so we really need to save our earth. That's what our leaders have also realized and agreed. And as we have been discussing from the Paris Agreement itself, the goal has already been set, and that global goal has now been translated into our national goals, especially through the NDCs. So basically our job now is to get all our NDCs properly implemented, and all the goals that has been set into NDCs are achieved. Of course, it might sound simple, but it's quite complicated. And that's why we are here. The 2 days of conference was, really exciting. You have seen me, I am here full time. If we had kept some prize for one of the active participants, I would win. That's why we did not keep that. So the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and the behavior that we need to develop, we need to exchange, we need to transfer are key to really achieve the success. That's why we have been saying that the knowledge and experience sharing is quite important, and that's where this the theme comes: policy, practice, and experience on 100% renewable energy. As we have discussed, the 100% renewable energy might sound like a dream, but one day we will definitely achieve. Of course, sooner or later, but we really need to make our efforts that we achieve it sooner, so that, as it has been told yesterday, the earth, the resources that we borrowed from our future generations, we keep safe for them, and we consume as little as possible. So this is something I wanted to highlight. And in terms of like achieving the goals and achieving the actions, we need right policies, strategies, procedures, business model, right technology and resources that we can realize through our concerted efforts. So that's why the collaboration, cooperation and partnership is quite important, which has been well highlighted through the 2 days of conference. So let's continue our discussion. This is not the end, but this is the beginning. So we should have more of the conferences like this one. and the main deliberations that was summarized by our colleague in a wonderful way. So there are the moderators who have taken the notes also. So we from the organizing team side, we will develop a form of a report or a proceeding, whatever, and will bring to the notice of our government. I just want to respond very quickly to our colleagues' concern regarding there was no political representation here in the conference. Yes, that's true, but we are currently in a transition. If you are following the news, you might have heard that our Right Honorable President has called for new government, formation of new government yesterday. So we just finished the election and a new government is yet to be formed. So that's why this time at the political level, this program was not that highlighted, but at the bureaucratic level, together with all the stakeholders from government to civil society, private sector, financing institutions, academia, and all. So it has been spread and represented. And our media colleagues are also spreading it among all the common people. So definitely for the next episode of this, we'll definitely feature it at the political level, also at the highest level. So with these words, once again, I acknowledge the support right from BMJ to all the partners who partnered with us, and all the colleagues who contributed as a speaker, moderator, participant, panelist, and rapporteur. So thank you everyone. Artiji has already made the elaborate list, so I do not want to be that elaborate. So thank you everyone, and for international delegates, wish you a safe stay for rest of the stay here in Nepal. Cold is a bit growing, so be careful, and safe travels back home. Thank you all. Thank you very much. And we conclude here. Thank you.